Hello and welcome to this short video on how to create an item. To do this, we're going to go to Inventory and then Items. When we are creating a brand new item, so typically if you're creating a new item, you would be clicking Auto Assign, and Counterpoint will take care of assigning that next available number. Now I could build this item from scratch. It would be, I'll create a new item called test112233. I'll give this some price. And I could give this a cost. I can decide if it's discountable. I can decide if it's taxable. I get to pick what category this belongs in. So maybe I'll put this under apparel. There is a subcategory. You do not have to have a subcategory. There is account codes. Most of your items will probably fall under one primary account code. And then if this is an item from a vendor and they provide barcodes, you could provide that barcode yourself. And here I'm going to pick my vendor. And maybe, even though I'm going to assign my own number, this vendor might have their own item SKU that they refer to this item, in which case I can put that there. I'm going to save my changes as I go along here, but I just want to show you that we began by manually creating an item from scratch, and because I did auto assign, once I hit save, Counterpoint filled in that number, and you can see we've created this brand new item. I should point out that fields in blue, or whatever the highlight color is on your PC, might be blue, might be green, but those are the required fields. So had I been creating this item, if I had not provided account code, and if I tried to hit save, I'll get an error message. You must enter a value for account code. So blue or highlighted fields are required. As I was creating this example, I did not mention item type, so I'm going to create one more item. However, this time I'm going to show you what I'd recommend is, in the world of retail, it's pretty common that when you're creating a brand new item, there's a very good chance you already have an item that already exists that's very similar. And so if we can save you a few clicks, we want to show you how to save a few clicks. So I'm going down the road, I'm creating a brand new item. I still hit my auto assign to get that next number, but you'll notice here Counterpoint has a nice field called copy from item. So I can go in and maybe let's say I'm creating a putter, and I can come in and say it's very similar to this one, and maybe this is the 2024 version of the Dunlop Ultimate Putter. Now by taking advantage of the copy from, you'll notice all these fields that filled in for me. Now maybe the price for this item is slightly different, and maybe the cost on this is slightly different. But if I chose a good example, there's a good chance that some of these other things, like if the item's discountable, if it's taxable, what category, subcategory, what vendor, if I chose a good example, chances are a lot of these fields are already set for me. Now, the first time we created an item, I did not point out item type. As long as we're here, I want to show you. When you create an item, there are a few different types. The most common, I would say 99% of what you create will be of type inventory. There are 3 other types, and I won't go into too much detail, but non-inventory is an item that you sell, but for whatever reason, you don't keep track of a quantity on hand. Service is a very similar, it really kind of accomplishes the same goal. It's something that you sell, you charge, you take money, but there's no quantity on hand to track. So for example, if you were a furniture shop and you offered resurfacing or refinishing of tables or chairs, that could be a service fee. So you have a dollar amount for this, but there's no quantity on hand. I can't go out on the shelf and count how many finishing services I have, because that's a service that's going to happen. Lastly, there's discount. This is an item. If you create this, when you put it onto a ticket, it actually takes off that amount. I'll show you an example of that here. But in this example, we were copying from an existing item, and it just makes our life so much easier to copy from. Now, I haven't pointed out, there are a few more tabs here, and I'll just talk about these briefly. On description, we are offered a few more fields. The primary description used throughout Counterpoint is this one called description. Even though they do give us some additional fields, those typically, they're not used unless we kind of go out of our way to take advantage of those. So in general, you should make use of this description, but do know you do have some additional fields if you choose to use them. Units, typically you're choosing your stocking unit up front. You might choose to set up a vendor unit. This might be how you purchase. So maybe this item you purchase from the vendor, in which case one dozen equals 12 eaches, and that is how you could set up a vendor unit. You might have gridded items. I'll show you a gridded item. See if I can find one quickly. A shirt is a good example. With gridded items, it just simply means that it might be a single item, but it might come in different sizes and colors. If that's the case, you can specify, Counterpoint uses the term grid dims, you can specify those grid dims. If you have multiple grid dims, then you might, from the vendor, you might have barcodes that point at those individual grid dims. So you could come here to this tab, you could click generate barcodes, and you could come fill in what the vendor has. And maybe for the vendor, this is 8022254 or whatever, and that is the barcode that they use, that if you scan this at the register, it not only would bring up this item, but it would bring up the correct color and size. Profiles, you can have additional profiles. This is a place where you can pick your own kind of fields to put additional information about your items. Serialize, if you have higher end items, if you're selling snow blowers, then you might want to keep track of the serial number on those. This is a place in Counterpoint where you get to define that. E-commerce, Counterpoint at one point in time had an e-commerce option. The NCR no longer provides that option, but other folks who've come along and created their own e-commerce interfaces, sometimes they choose to make use of this because it's already here. So check with your e-commerce provider and see if they take advantage of these fields. On the other tab, we have some additional fields. Lastly, there is a field for substitute items. I don't know many folks who have the time or the energy to go fill these in, but you could, if you chose to, go in and you might have some very popular items, but if they're out of stock, you might choose to put in here some substitute items, and this would give your employees something to recommend to the customer if the primary item was out of stock. So that's just a very brief, quick overview of creating items in Counterpoint. Of course, if you have questions, please reach out to us at LPA Retail, and we would be always happy to help.